I'm Matt Valley, and this is the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Today's guest is one of those. I'm welcoming Scott Aaron to the program, who's the newly minted Senior Director of Insights for the very innovative furniture company called Lovesac. I think he just started on Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So Scott was, before that, he had his own consultancy for about 8+ years, where he worked with Lovesac and lots of other clients. So I guess they poached you. They pulled you out of your own gig.
That's right.
And before that, Scott spent years at Luxottica and my favorite consumer packaged goods company, Procter and Gamble. So I have to thank, by the way, Lisa Gooding from Ipsos, formerly GFK, for introducing the two of us under no real pretense whatsoever. As I recall, she sent an email and said, "Hey, Matt, there's this guy, Scott Aaron. He lives in Cincinnati. You live in Cincinnati.
That's right.
I like you. I like Scott. You guys will probably like each other." So thank you for that, Lisa.
And she was right.
Yeah, she was right. I miss working with Lisa. She's great. So I'm super happy to have you on the podcast. The thing that a lot of people might not know about you is that you are what I call a shed shredder. So Scott has been writing and performing his own music with some buddies for quite some time, and some really good stuff. And he's got good taste in music, so I'm really interested in your Desert Island Disc. We've never discussed that before, but
that's right.
Anyway, welcome to the show, Scott.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's good to be here. It's good to talk to you, as always.
Here. Excellent. Well, let's get started on the professional side, right? So you've been in and around Insights. So how did you get started, and how did you decide to stay?
How do I manage to keep the scam going, as we were talking about the other day? I actually came into it. Speaking of Cincinnati, I got my MBA at University of Cincinnati. And I was coming out. I did a couple projects with different companies, and one of them was with P&G, with a group called Corporate New Ventures that was tasked with what are the categories the Procter should get into, or what's going to be a category in 10 years that isn't really now.
Right.
Because all the verticals had their own new ventures, but there wasn't really a corporate one. Like, where does Procter go next? What's the next, laundry? And I did a project with them, really enjoyed it. And they had an agency that really was responsible for it was really concept development, basically. At that stage of idea development, it's really just, how do we position this idea or talk about this product?
Right.
And so I met these agency folks, and I decided to go to work with them. And I worked on that because I liked the people in that group at P&G. I worked on that group for, I think, maybe like 3 or 4 years, pretty long time. So they were my main client, but I worked on a lot of other stuff. So the agency was called Northlick, and it had kind of a brand innovation part called Brandstorm.
Okay.
Yep. So I was sort of a Brandstorm person, which was really just strategic brand development. Like, what is this going to be all about? And so I worked on Swiffer. Like, I did the first concept development for Swiffer.
Cool.
Yep. That was pretty amazing in a way. And I did it for, I worked on the first copy development for Febreze that failed. And that one book that's about habits, it has a chapter about Febreze. And it has, like, my agency is like, yeah, this is basically what happened on that project. Like, this is kind of where it comes in when the aha happened. And it was, previous to that, it was like, we were kind of in this cul-de-sac of it being a really niche thing. And there was a few insight things that kind of had to do with habits that sort of broke it open. So I worked on that too. And then I did a concept development for a crazy mop.
Okay.
That became Swiffer Wet Jet. It wasn't
cool.
When I worked on it, it wasn't Wet Jet. And my experience would be, I'd work on these things for like 6 months, like Swiffer. Like, I knew more about dusting than anyone. And so I was basically like a user of qualitative research, basically.
Right.
So at the agency, I'm like, well, here's this kind of stuff we need to know to figure out this concept, um, and we'd work a lot with the CMK group at the time at P&G, Consumer Market Knowledge, and the marketing folks, and we'd all kind of go out and do a bunch of qual to figure these things out. And we would joke that we would, after doing 3 months of qual on dust, like we were like, we know more about dusting than any humans, like we're like the world's expert on, what do people think about dusting and all that. And so, the first one of those projects I did, when I first went to qualitative, I was just like, oh my God, this is like incredible. Like, this is amazing. Because even in grad school, in marketing classes, it didn't really dive into any of these kinds of tools or techniques. It was just sort of high level strategic kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I was just like, oh my God, like people are giving us the answer. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is great.
Go
Like a
figure.
test where how you going with the answers. Like, oh, I know what this concept should be, and I know exactly why, because this is how people think about it.
Hmm.
And so that was really exciting and fun. And like, again, my experience would be I work on these things, and then 2 years later I'd be in the grocery store, or I'd be watching TV, and I'd be like, oh, there it is. There's the
Yeah.
oh, it's called Swiffer. Like, that was the brand. That was the brand. And and I'd see like how close was it to like what we developed, and
Right.
and most of the time it was pretty close
Yeah.
because they of course qualified a lot of those things on those concepts, so they were not super keen, I don't think, to tinker too much with them.
Yeah.
So I worked at that agency for 5 or 6 years, and then I went to the client side. It was the usual agency thing, like it was having some um, P&G kind of shut off the new product innovation thing for a little bit there,
Right.
as they
Yep.
were having leadership change, and so that business was kind of going away. And another one of the agency's big businesses was kind of struggling at that time, so it seemed like it was the right time to look around. And I had done it for a while, and so I was looking around, and I ended up going to work in kind of a part innovation, part research job for lens crafters.
Hmm.
And through my time at lens crafters, my job um, became more on the insights side.
Right.
And while I was there, when I first came in, we had just bought Sunglass Hut, so that was kind of a big deal, and that was a very different customer than the lens crafters customer, and we kind
Yeah.
of figured that out. Um, and then we bought one of our bigger competitors, and so then so bottom line, we went from being sort of a one brand and one category company to a portfolio of brands in a couple different categories, which
Hmm.
was really a big adjustment to make. And certainly from a um, comms and brand and experience perspective, you're going from sort of like pushing your one train down the track as best you can to, oh, I got these other, my tracks are crossing now, and I've got brands that are kind of saying the same thing, and are, so, like, how do we rationalize all this and make sense of it?
Right.
Um, and so I worked there for a while, just did a lot of classic stuff, qual, quant, copy testing, brand tracking,
Hmm.
concept testing, all that kind of stuff. Then I worked for Procter for a couple of years, and I worked on the Gillette acquisition.
Yeah. So
So,
it's one of my favorite categories, I must say.
so I, so I was an experienced hire, which was sort of an experiment for P&G at that time, because they really
Yeah.
take people out of school. They don't really. The only way they get people with experience is when they acquire companies, basically.
Hmm.
And so they were trying to get more people into CMK, and that was one of the strategies, was like, well, let's hire some experienced people and see what happens. And so that's how I got in. And I worked there for, I think, a couple years, maybe a little bit less. And I went back to Lux for a little while to
Hmm.
head up research. And I was heading it up after I was there for a couple of years, I guess. But that's when we really built the team out, and I had a
Hmm.
bigger team, and we're doing much more. And that's when I started getting into CX
Okay.
measurement.
Sure.
another team had that at Lux, and I was kind of like, I think we could do more with that, and so I kind of lobbied to get it, and um, so that was kind of my journey. And I had just worked at Lux for a while, and my wife had started her own business. She has a change management um, consulting and training business, and she had done that, and I just was like, that's kind of cool. Like, you kind of get to do your own thing, and um, I never really liked having management or bosses that much. So I was like, well, that's kind of appealing. And so in a way, I think she was the inspiration for sure to even try it. And I really
Yeah.
just thought, I got my phone and I got my computer. Like, this could just be really bad. This may not work at all, and this could be like me calling people and no one calls me back, and that's it. It becomes a very short career chapter of, so I kind of gave myself like a year and a half to figure out if I could do it, and kind of 6 months check-ins, and it went, it went well enough that I could keep doing it. And
Right.
luckily, the people that I worked with before, a lot of them did hire me for different things when they could. And um, so I ended up doing that for about 8 years. And a lot of what I did was really consulting. Like, I didn't really do much execution. And in fact, I pretty much tried to stay away from that. So that was sort of my path. And one of my clients was Lovesac. And
Mhm.
and as I've gone along, I've certainly realized the value um, of leadership, of the company you work for. What's the quality and the caliber of the leadership is a huge variable
Mhm.
in how things are going to go in general, and what your work environment's going to be like. And I knew that was a relatively rare combination, where you have people at the top that are very consumer focused and very consumer driven. And even I had a conversation with one of our suppliers, one of our partners, the other day, and they were just like, well, we love working with you guys. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, you guys use it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, you better be careful with what you tell us, because we're basically gonna, in that meeting, go, okay, we're doing this. If we maybe shouldn't do it, you should say that, because
Yeah.
we're gonna go, all right, we're gonna go spend $3 million on that now. So
You got to hire good suppliers then, for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. People who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And because so many times, I think, in that world, you do your project and you present it to the people that commissioned it, and the higher ups may or may not be there. So it kind of goes into a black hole. And then
Mhm. Yeah.
maybe 6 months later, some variation of it kind of comes spinning back out of the organization at you. And you're like, oh, this is sort of like that thing we did, but it's kind of different now. And
Yeah.
so, they're like, yeah, it's kind of wild to see you guys talk about it, and just like, you'll just basically decide to do stuff based on it.
Right.
And, those people, the leadership, and just that setup, and the quality of the products are really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I got to go
Definitely.
research them, and so I got to see they're pretty good, and I know all their CX stuff. So I know their experience is pretty good. So
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't signing up. That's one of the luxuries of a P&G or Luxottica, like, the product's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you're working on is not like, let's try to make people think this is good. It is good. It's like,
Yeah.
you're on the winning end of things usually. Um, so all of those things were just like, yeah, I think I should probably do this. Like, I didn't, as I told them, I didn't leave my job at Lux in one of those, Jerry Maguire moments where you're just like, I'm never working in a gray cube again, never again. It wasn't that. It was just like, I think I want to go on my own. I think I want to work on different stuff. And I was becoming the person at the company. I think I told you before, where like, you started to have this kind of churn of people, not super fast, but enough, and sort of the same ideas would come up because they're kind of
Stay there
obvious,
long enough. Yeah.
and so I'd be like, oh man, I'm turning into that person in the meeting that's like, well, do you want to know the other 4 times we did this, how it turned out? Or do you want to just do it, and this can be number 5, and we can, so I was just like, that's not a great person to be. It's not really
It's
who
not
I
a
want to
great
be.
person to be, but organizations need that
Yeah,
sometimes.
I was the organizational memory for marketing what worked and what didn't kind of stuff. So
All right.
um,
So let's talk about, speaking of the background, shed
what-
shredding. Shed shredding.
sh-
That's my word of the day. So tell us how you got
something you would
started.
have copyrighted. Um, I play guitar, and I didn't really start playing guitar until I was in college, but I probably should have started a lot earlier. I don't really know why I didn't, but because I was always interested in it. I guess I was maybe just intimidated by it. Like, it looks kind of hard, and if you have a guitar and you just mess around with it, you're like, it's probably like having golf clubs and messing around with them. Like, oh, this is kind of hard, like this isn't. No, it looks easy on TV, but this is not easy to hit this white ball or to get a D chord out of this thing. So, but I always liked music. At my family um, was kind of musical. My parents loved music, and when I was little, I had a little uh, turntable, and when I was like 4, they just gave me access to all their 45s,
Mhm.
which at that time were only 10 or 12 years old. They weren't like oldies like they are
Yeah.
now. And and they had all the good, like, full fat, like, early rock, like Hound Dog, like Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Dwayne Eddy, uh,
Cool.
Fats Domino. I mean, all the really good, Jerry Lee Lewis, all that really good. And I just listened to that for probably like the first few years I listened to music. I just would put on like Good Golly Miss Molly or
Yeah.
School Days or something. And so
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a weird, I think, intro into music for somebody my age, because I was listening to music that was already kind of considered old, pretty old at the time.
Right.
Um, so once I was in high school in California, that's when the music people were, I think, more into music there than in other places, possibly.
Okay.
And because the Bay Area has such a big music heritage, and
Yeah.
so
Slayer.
you had like the Deadhead people that were just sort of hardcore, like they were 14 and they were already like, I think they're already following the Grateful Dead. I don't see them in school that much. Like, they show up occasionally. Um, we saw Jay Giles Band, which was really popular at that time.
Yeah.
Down, 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 down. And this band opened for them called U2 that was
I've never heard of
was
them.
from Ireland.
Oh,
And we
really?
were like, these guys are pretty good. It's like the opening band, like, oh, we've heard of them. Oh, Dave's heard of them. Ray's heard of them. I'm like, I haven't heard of them. And we're like, these guys are pretty good. Like, a couple of these songs are like decent. Because they would do that thing that they could do, which I think really good bands can do, where they're doing in a song, and they could just kind of like levitate it up like another level, where you just kind of felt like everyone just kind of went like, whoa.
Yeah.
And even then they could do that. Like, a couple of songs, you were like, wow, they're like hitting some other level here. Like, it's pretty crazy. And so somewhere in there in college, I started playing. My roommate had a guitar, and I just started playing it. And I wrote songs before that. Like, I wrote lyrics and stuff before that. And so I started putting it together and writing songs. And I had a couple friends in college that did it too. My friend Rob Brookman and Peter Gorman. And we were just buddies, like lived in the same dorm. Rob was my roommate. And Peter always wrote tons of songs, like in the 90s. I mean, he's just one of those guys, like, he's just a writer, like he just cranks out songs. And he would send me these cassettes that were just like, they were albums. Like, they'd have 11 songs on them. A lot
Yeah.
of them had like little like instrumentals in them. Like, it would have like a 45-second little interlude of something, and then it would go into the next song.
Yeah.
And just like amazing. Like, you could just put them in and play them like a regular album. It was
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. And so somewhere in the middle '00s,
The aughts.
my friend Rob was friends. He was in a band called the Lucky Ones in Chicago, and he wrote all of their songs, or most of their songs, and some of them he wrote with another guy, Dave Kay. But he ended up So one of the Rob knew a guy, Jamie Wagner, that actually owned a studio, Strobe, it was called, in Humboldt Park. And he said, "Hey, we should go and like let's record some of Peter's songs." Peter's got like tons of songs. And so as I say, like some people golf, and like we decided like that, that was kind of our hobby, was like, we're gonna make records. We don't golf, so we gotta have something, right? We gotta have something to do. So we screwed around in the studio for a weekend, just for the hell of it, kind of. I mean, did like, I don't know, like 16-hour days kind of thing. And at the end of the first session, Rob was like, we should finish this. Like, this is probably worth making an actual album on, because we didn't go in with the intention of doing that. So, so we came back. It took a year before we could all, because we all were working, this was when I think I worked the second session. I was working for P&G, I think. Like, I came back from like China, and then I like went to Chicago. Like, got in my car and went to Chicago, and or Russia. I don't remember which trip it was, but it was around that time. And kind of finished it, and then Jamie and Rob finished a lot of it too. Afterwards, they put a lot of other stuff, because some amazing vibes player is on the first album that has like an album that was in like the Jazz New York Times best love list. Like, I'm like, that guy played vibes. We joked, we were like, we should make it so the album is like that guy's album. Like, put it out under his name. Hey, it's Jerome blah 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 with Lazy Old Son. Like I play one song for 30 seconds.
Lazy Old Son, that's the name of your band.
Lazy Old Son is what Peter named it, yeah. And I think it was a way to avoid any kind of people ever finding us or us ever selling anything. Because
too late.
You Google it, and it's like all the renditions of the Lazy Old Son, SUN song come up. It's just millions, you can never get to the Lazy Old Son, SON. So it's like, sales proof, basically, genius marketers that we are. So, yeah, so we made that album, and then we made another one. Same process, like 2 studio. I think it was. Yeah, I think we did 2 times in the studio, 2 weekends that were about a year apart, and came out with the second one, which was a little bit better, I think, better of an album.
So,
yeah.
So thinking about those 2 worlds are very different, right? So what you've done on the music side, and then your professional life. Yeah. Are there any parallels that you draw between the 2, or maybe lessons from one to the other?
I think, I think where the overlap is for me, because I don't tend to think of them as, tend to think of music as something I do for fun. And like, I think of my job as fun, but it's sort of different. I think of music as being more creative and more like, you can be really open-minded about things. And I don't necessarily, I guess, approach work the exact same way. But the one thing that is similar is I am analytical. And like, I like to know how things work. I think that's why I liked doing all that concept development stuff. Like, I like to go, if we express something like this, people will like it because they think this. If we express it like this, they won't like it because they think this. Like, having that insight of like, I'm not just listening to reaction. I'm like, oh, I see how they think about this. This is the logic to them. Because of this, then I believe this, then I do this. Like, I could start to see this is how they think about it. Like, I could map it out. Yeah. Here's how they think about it. So here's how they'll, and I've seen, other teams that do a lot of qual get to that point where they're like, we know what people are going to say before they say it. Like, we know how they think about this stuff, which is the best place, I think, when marketers are that way. Yeah. Then it's really efficient, right? The ideas are just better because they just know, like, oh, people love this. What if we did something like that, And I think I'm the same way about music. Like, I kind of listen to music and on some weird level try to figure out, like, why do I like this song so much? Like, why is this so good? Or why is this so terrible? Or whatever it is. I think I apply that same, like, like picking it apart a little bit and trying to understand it. Although I kind of know with music, part of what I like is when, you can't really explain it. You
Yeah.
can't really get to the bottom of it in a way.
Yeah.
It's
That's a
like
bit of the magic, a bit of the magic of
exactly,
music. Yeah.
exactly. You can't ever, reduce it to some super formulaic thing or whatever. But I think listen to music to songs or albums I think are great. And I do think of it that way sometimes. Like what makes this so good?
Yeah.
Like what makes me like this so much? So
Yeah.
I think that part of my brain is the same,
Hmm.
like the same as work, like how are we going to figure this out? Like what do we really need to do here?
And so back on the work topic.
Yeah.
So here you are now. You're leading insights for a very, very quickly growing, exciting furniture company. Um, as you think about insights and reflect on your experience, and think about where you're taking it at Lovesac, what does the future look like from your standpoint?
Um, I I don't really I don't really have a great sense of that. I think certainly a lot of I think one good thing that I think a lot of um, insights people have embraced is that there's a lot of ways of getting information.
Hmm.
There's not just like, oh, surveys and whatever. Like there's a lot of ways to figure things out and that are more accessible now than they used to be, I think. So I do think that that's evolving to where there's like people are doing more hybrid approaches of let's do this stuff with social and then maybe there is some survey stuff and then maybe there is some other sort of big data distillation going on. um, so I think that's kind of nice that it's breaking out of just being and I think really the marketing and positioning and effectiveness of insights in a way is so challenging because it is so many different things that kind of get put under this umbrella. And so it's I think as um, like our clients in the world, it's kind of a hard thing to understand. Like, what do you guys do exactly? Like, and because it is such a set of different tools, it's
Right.
so disparate and so kind of spread out. And
It's not just surveys and focus groups anymore.
right, exactly. And um, so I don't really know exactly, where it's going. I know I tend to gravitate towards things that I feel like have proven to have some like predictive value. Like it's not just, oh, this copy test spits out these numbers that we find valuable. It's sort of like these tie back to some reality that we're trying to achieve too.
Hmm.
Um, so I think tools that are like that are good. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Scott. So this is a podcast, right? So
yep. Oh
curious to
yeah.
know what other podcasts or maybe other media you're listening to for inspiration, enjoyment, et cetera. Something that you might recommend.
Well, I do. I do tend to look at the AMA
Hmm.
stuff. It's such a big umbrella of different things. I find that,
American Marketing Association.
yeah, American
Yeah.
Marketing Association. I find you can find some relevant info between all the publications they have and articles they have. I don't do as many podcasts. I think the people I know that do do them, like did them when they commuted, and they're like, yeah, I'm not really doing them that much anymore. Um, there's one hilarious one though that like research people would probably get a kick out of. That's especially anyone that does like CX stuff. That's called like Water Too Wet, Beach Too Sandy. That's
Okay.
actually started by these two people in Cincinnati.
Okay.
That's them reading in a comically dramatic fashion Yelp reviews. So it'll be
Nice.
like, you know, Denny's Dog Barn and Dog Park, 1 star. I don't know what Denny's problem is. Like the way they read them is just really funny, and of course they find the most sort of over the top ridiculous. These people ruined my life. Like kinds of
Yeah.
reviews. So that one's really funny, and it always is about businesses. So it's always about like
Yeah.
you know there was one that was a car wash in Minneapolis. Like it was like I don't know what, these people need to learn about business, they're just these really funny, and the
Nice.
way they read them are funny. And it's a brother and sister that do the podcast, and they they're just, it's to the point where like the brother will start reading, we'll get to like the fourth word, and the sister will just lose it and start laughing. I mean, it's literally, you're just laughing at the sister going, oh my God, I know what's going to happen. What's going to happen with this adopted ferret, from this place, oh my God, I know what's going to happen, so that one's really funny. And like I said, it's terrifying because you're hoping it's not going to be like a, Lovesac store review, but,
Nice.
so that's just, yeah, it's just funny and entertaining. And, but
Cool.
also like all of us in business, like, oh yeah, they could be talking about our business next, it's Yelp reviews. So
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right, so I've been waiting to ask you this question. I don't know the answer in advance, but I'm just fascinated to hear the answer. So if you listen to any of these podcasts, you know that this question is coming.
yep, I do. That's all I've been thinking about, really.
Good, good. So
Yeah,
you're stranded on the desert island.
been
You've
doing
got
zero
three
work
doing zero
about
work. That's
thinking
right.
about this.
Chilling on a love sack.
Right.
You have 3 records to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are
um I would say here's kind of how I picked them, because I think this is it's sort of a way of asking what's your favorite 3 albums. But I kind of picked, these are albums that I really like, that I feel like either I could listen to them for a long time and not
Mm-hmm.
get sick of them,
Okay.
or I haven't listened to them and played them to death, so I
Yep.
could listen to them a lot.
Yep. Everybody feels the need to qualify their
Right.
answer somehow. So.
Yeah, right. Especially on this podcast. Like, well, let me go through the methodology. Like, let me show you my methodology slide.
Exactly.
Right. The thing that research people do that everyone else in the meeting's going to like, oh my God, are they going to talk about like how many people they talk to now? Just tell us the answer. So I would say I had a lot of candidates, but I really like the Wilco album Star Wars, which I
Okay. Yeah.
think they gave away free. Like I think I got it free. Like, hey, you can download it whenever you want. That album is really cool. It has some really interesting songs on it, and it's very, like, the guitar playing and stuff in their band is really good. Their
Yeah.
guitar players are just kind of crazy. Like I don't even know what's going on in their songs. And Jeff Tweedy, like I like his songs and his lyrics and stuff. So that album, for whatever reason, and I've listened to other Wilco albums and they just haven't hit me quite the same way. And I think I think is far from their most lauded album. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's kind of like it kind of came and went, I think. But I really like that album for some reason. And it's very, like I said, complex. Like I could just sit there and listen to it and figure out like, what in the hell is going on in this thing? I would say I really like the album Avalon by Roxy Music.
Okay.
And it seems like I never really get tired of that album. And I do go back to it and play it probably a couple times a year for like, whatever, the last 20 years or something. And it has such a mood throughout it. Like it just
Mhm.
sets a totally, like, you feel like it transports you to some place that you're in. You know what I mean? It's not like songs. You feel like, oh, I'm in some fancy Brian Ferry video where I'm on a yacht.
Right.
Like I'm in San Tropez on the beach or something. So that's a good, like that one I keep kind of going back to over and over. And this other one I was listening to just the other day, and I kind of like have this game of like what album comes out of the gate and just has like the most like really awesome songs in a row where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe, oh my God, it's another one. Like where you're just like, oh my God, these are like incredible. And one of the albums that does that is the album The Velvet Underground by The Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
It has the most incredible run of like from the first song through like 6 or 7. It's just like incredible. You can't even believe this, like you could write songs that good in the 6 months or whatever they probably took to make, to write it.
Right.
So it's just like, that's just like amazing. And they're so they're done in such a way, it's so sort of lo-fi and almost like not produced,
Yep.
but the guitars in it are really cool, and that you don't get tired of it. It's not like, doesn't have anything that just makes you go, oh God, I've heard this so many times.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just its rawness and its almost lack of augmentate. It's like the opposite of Star Wars. Like, it's the lack of complexity and the lack of everything that just makes it
Yeah.
easy to listen to over and over and over again, and not be like, oh, I'm kind of tired of this, kind of tired of these songs or whatever. But so that's my three. It was hard.
Good choices. No duplicates there yet. At some point I'm going to compile the list, and of course I've got to run the stats on this thing because that's the data I've got here. So
right, yeah.
If it looks like data, it's got to be counted, right? So.
Exactly.
All right, Scott. Well, this has been awesome. It's great to catch up as always.
Yes.
Love to hear your story.
Good talking to you
about your career and your shed shredding and all that good stuff.
Yes.
So let's definitely stay in touch and
yes.